Welcome to another Crafting with Roswell. Today we are making a paper roses wreath. So if you've never made paper flowers before, there's a bunch of different patterns you can find online. Scalloped edges. You can also use a cutting machine like a Cricut or a Silhouette Cameo to cut out your paper hearts for you. But I'm going to show you an easy way just with circle shapes to create little roses that you can then add to your heart wreath. So in your kit, you received a cardboard heart and a piece of twine. And then you have 10 sheets of paper, a couple white sheets, and then a bunch of different shades of pink to make your roses. And these are just obviously a sample of what you could do. If you have different copier paper that you prefer to use, by all means use that instead. This was just to give everyone something in their kit. You also need craft glue. You can also use hot glue. I recommend using the lower setting because your hands are going to be working inside the rose to secure it. So there's a big potential for burnt fingers if you use hot glue. You will also need scissors. For suggested extras, like I said, different colored paper, using a pencil if you prefer to draw out your spiral before actually cutting. But you could also use a pencil to help trace your heart onto scrapbook paper and finish off one side with scrapbook paper, finish off the front with scrapbook paper and only make a few roses, or use all of your paper to fill your entire wreath. And then tweezers can be used if you have trouble with your fingers and rolling up small objects. The tweezers can help keep the paper rolling for you versus having to just use your fingertips. So let's get started. So I am not one to cut out all of my pages at first to get started. Everyone has a different way of approaching a project. I kind of go sheet by sheet. So I have one whole sheet and I've already gone ahead and cut it out into rough shapes around each circle. So I don't spend time cutting every single circle out perfectly. I go for rough shapes, and then once I have my rough shape, I cut just inside that black border line to create my circle. So I cut out roughly, then go in and fine tune my circle, and then this circle is going to be turned into a spiral to then be rolled up to create one rose. And when you see it, that part will make more sense. And just to let you know, I am going to keep working on my rose wreath probably all weekend long. This is not a project that you have to finish in one setting by any means. If you find yourself getting frustrated, definitely stop, walk away from it. This is supposed to be a fun activity. And if you find that this is completely unenjoyable, you can pass the kit to somebody else. Use this heart frame for something else completely. The kit's yours once you have it, but give it a try and go from there to see if this is a project for you or not. So once you have your circles cut, the big thing to keep in mind is that the width of your spiral helps determine the height of your rose. So if you cut bigger width of your spiral, it's going to be a taller flower. And so when you're cutting your spiral, you want to try to keep your spiral width consistent. And that helps give you a more consistent final rose. But I do like to switch up the sizing from like bunch to bunch, and it gives you a little more depth in your project. But that's like a mindful approach to it where you're aware of the size diameter you're cutting and changing it for different sections and then mixing them all into each other for your finished wreath. So here's one of our medium-sized circles. So I'm just going to take my scissors and make sure that I've got this on camera for you to see. I'm just going to come in at an angle and make a notch, just cutting into the paper. And then my next cuts are going to start watching the outer edge of my circle, creating a spiral. So I'm cutting inside, keeping the same distance from the outer edge of the paper. And I find holding my scissors and turning my paper to be the easier approach for me. If you prefer to move your scissors all through your paper, that's up to you, but we just keep cutting until we end up in the very center. So you'll end up with this little kind of rounded surface, and this is actually what we end up gluing our rose down on, so this actually becomes the base of our flower. So we're going to go ahead and kind of flip our spiral here, and you start from our first outer edge and roll in. So this little point can be hard to deal with when you're wrapping, so if you want, you can go ahead and just cut that off. And which direction you roll doesn't really matter, whatever's most comfortable for you. So I kind of prefer rolling towards me with the spiral kind of hanging off to the left. So I'm just going to go ahead and fold my paper and start wrapping. And as you're winding and wrapping this, you're kind of following this inner line groove of your spiral as the base of your rose. And so you'll see that your paper kind of wants to naturally just kind of fold along the curve that you've cut. You don't have to roll it super tight, but you don't want to do super, super loose either. It's finding a little mix that works for you. And so this little creasy point right here came from when I made my initial cut into my circle. So I'm going to go ahead and use my scissor and round that out now, and then keep rolling. And you'll come to a point where the paper wants to bunch up a little bit. That's fine. You don't have to force it, but just keep rolling, keep rolling, keep rolling. Keep rolling, keep rolling, keep rolling. And then here's our base. So right now it's not looking like much of a rose, but when you let it go and just let it bounce a little bit, you'll see it takes on more of a rose shape. Now to glue this, I like to turn it upside down and hold this base off to the side and kind of support that middle of the flower with my finger. And I'm going to add glue over all of these little rings. Get my tacky glue to pour out. So I put some on the rings, and I put some on my base. And I just turn the base over onto those rings and then flip my whole flower over. And from there you can give it a little twisting, move it around, push it down, push all those pieces into the glue to help hold them. And there is my rose. So that's the good news. It's just cutting a spiral, it's wrapping it, using a tweezer if that's easier for you to do the wrapping step. And so each circle then can become a rolled rose. And then the rolled rose gets placed on the wreath, and you keep building and filling it in. If you decide to fill the whole wreath, like I said, you could also take a shortcut, wrap your wreath, glue on a piece of scrapbook paper, and just make a bunch of roses in one section. You could paint your wreath, but since they are cardboard, they're really going to soak up the paint, so you might find that it's a little heavier and less durable that way. And so then you keep making your roses and glue them on. But I wanted to show you what I did. So if you're seeing cardboard peek through, save the scraps of your rose paper, and you can always glue them down roughly onto your cardboard and then trim them after they've dried to then give you a solid color base that matches your roses to be underneath them, so that you're not seeing the brown cardboard show through between your flowers. So that's what I plan on doing with all the little scrap edges, is kind of filling those in on my board. That way when you're looking down at your wreath, you're not seeing any of the brown cardboard. And so that's essentially it, everyone. So take your time, cut out your circles, make your spirals, start winding, do your gluing, place them on your wreath, and keep going. If you have any questions, reach out to me. I know this is going to be a time-consuming project. That's why I called it a work of heart. You're going to definitely need your patience in order to complete this one. But the end result is really worth it, and all made from copier paper and a cardboard template. So reach out to me if you need any help, if you have any questions, and I'll be back again next week for another project. Bye, everyone.